5 January 1949. Charité Hospital, Berlin, Mitte. She writes a line that cannot be said aloud. I have washed the wounds of 3 armies. Only my patients learn that enemies bleed the same color. A nurse, German, 38 years old. Her name in the roster is Elizabeth Hartmann. Liesel to colleagues. Widow of a tram conductor missing since 1943. 1 child lost to pneumonia in 1942. 1 daughter alive. She will die in 1972, leaving behind 2 notebooks, a ration card wallet, a folded photograph of a ward under blackout curtains, and a phrase that can stand as thesis. The uniforms over the beds have changed flags. The sheets are the same. Berlin is a ward that never stops admitting. 1933. Charité Hospital, Berlin. Elizabeth is 22. She enters the nurse training school with a sensible haircut and a clean blouse. New banners hang from the lecture hall. The head of nursing has a new oath. To the nation. To the Führer. She signs the attendance sheet. She learns the efficient way to strip a bed, the precise angle of an intramuscular injection, the mathematics of a ward. 24 beds, 12 morphine ampoules, 8 bedpans, 4 electrified sockets, 1 autoclave that rattles like a kettle. In 1934, a young physician is replaced. He is Jewish. The ward still calls him Herr Doktor in private. Then not at all. Names fall out of the mouth the way a tooth does. The gum forgets, then the tongue finds the gap again and again. One morning, his nameplate is gone from the corridor. The wall holds the ghost of a rectangle. Paint less faded under it. Files begin to carry new sections. Her notes are reviewed by a racial hygienist. Sterilization cases appear. Women come in with fear and leave with quiet eyes. The arithmetic of quotas replaces the arithmetic of beds. There are forms and careful euphemisms in circulars. She hears terms that will keep their bureaucratic calm long after the screams stop. 1936. The Olympic summer. The city looks clean. The wards have new white coats. A visiting committee inspects. The report reads, facilities modernizing, discipline improved. She straightens a bed for the inspection. The mattress has a dip where a patient's hip has pressed for weeks. She does not smooth it. It is an honest dip. She keeps a diary. She writes, we are learning to adjust. The medicine and the morality adjust too. 1939. War. The wards fill with young men whose lips are cracked from fever. In the first months, the patient briefs are tidy. Finland, France. The wounded return with souvenirs and jokes. The nurses are given a new priority list. Soldiers, then factory workers, then everyone else. She learns to give blood from one patient to another without transfusion equipment because the bottle is missing. She measures hemoglobin by guesswork and color charts. She writes, we are all learning to draw a line with less chalk. In 1941, the war stretches. Berlin looks confident and brittle. The Jewish hospital in Wedding still operates under guard. The Charité receives orders. The surgeons operate on soldiers for bullet wounds and on civilians for burns and malnutrition. The mathematics of calories enters the ward round. Nurses count bread and fat. Doctors count fevers. Jewish nurses and lab technicians are gone. Their absence sits over the microscope bench like dust. A new group of women arrive to clean and carry. They speak Polish, Ukrainian, Russian. Some wear wooden clogs, forced laborers. The hospital laundry runs on their shoulders. They wash the dirty sheets of men who insult them. A Polish woman tells a student nurse, the hands that scrub the blood do not choose the blood. The student repeats it in a whisper years later in an oral history. The record in the Bundesarchiv notes only increased staffing challenges. The arithmetic of ethics tightens its grip. The children's ward whispers, travel. injections given with a kindness that looks like mercy and carries another name. Elizabeth is assigned to the surgery floor. She tells herself that she does not know. The notes she saves for herself disagree. February 1943. Stalingrad. The hospital corridors are quiet for an hour after the news. Then the gurneys screech again. The first men from the east arrive with hands like cracked bark. They look like the rumor of a winter. The hospital receives directives to conserve anesthesia. Ether is heavy and precious. Ether has a smell like pears and chemical rain. The bottles are locked in the matron's cupboard. She unlocks it with a key she wears under her blouse. Nurses learn to distract. One holds a hand, one speaks, one turns a face to the ceiling and says, "Look at the light." The light is a face to the ceiling and says, "Look at the light." The light is a moldy bulb. November 1943. The first serious air raid. Sirens, basement shelters. The windows blow in. Glass is a new species of snow. The ward covers are soaked in blood, water, and disinfectant. 1944. Berlin is a city that alternates between noise and a stunned quiet. The wards are full of broken young and old people and of decisions too heavy for single hands. The orderlies tell stories about factories, about fatigue, about how they barter cigarettes for bread. The hospital procurement officer, a man named Karl Brenner, writes that he cannot source gauze except through unofficial channels. He is 40, civilian. He has a brown party book, obtained in 1937 because it made promotions easier. He keeps it in a drawer behind a bottle of cognac commandeered from a pharmacy shipment to Charité, then to the Wehrmacht, then to the Wehrmacht, then to the underground market, then back to the ward via his own network. He will later call this circuit an arithmetic that saved lives and dirtied hands. April 1945. The battle for Berlin. The Soviets advance street by street. The hospital becomes a casualty clearing station. The last of the supplies is distributed by rules and by whispers. The Red Army shells hit the administration building first. The surgery wing vibrates like a train carriage. Elizabeth and the surgeons move beds away from windows and toward interior walls. One surgeon stays and operates until the generator sputters. The nurse counts sutures by candlelight. She wraps gauze around stumps and counts them again. Soviet soldiers arrive in the corridors. They are 20, 22, 25. They carry the smell of gunpowder and mud. They ask for water in Russian. The hospital staff gives water. The first night is chaos. Some nurses are dragged. Some are hidden by doctors in the linen rooms. The archivist, who will later compile an oral history, will write how to record violence without recording it all. The file holds testimony and leaves it incomplete. The hospital register, more cold, marks that one nurse did not appear for shift on 2 May. The battle ends. Hitler is dead. Berlin is ash and missing windows. The Red Army hangs banners. A Kommandatura takes over the administration office. A new seal appears on the official letters. It reads in Cyrillic. The signature is in green pencil. The ambulances now carry Soviet stretchers. Soviet medics show German nurses how they wrap with rough bandage. German nurses show Soviet medics how the autoclave works. The autoclave does not always work. A bright young Soviet doctor with a scar along his cheekbone makes notes in a leather book. He thinks German instruments are good. He requisitions them. Berlin has learned that requisition is the most important word in a war's end. A United States Army European Theater Intelligence summary will later bracket this with order without consent. For the nurse, it is a man in a long coat pointing at a cabinet and another man nodding. The uniforms over the beds shift from field grey to brownish green. The faces are the same palette of pain and delirium. The nurse writes, "They bleed the same color," and hides the page under the mattress. 1945–1946. Aftermath. Rubble landscapes. Trümmerfrauen in coats with holes in the elbows. Women erasing streets with their hands. They sort bricks into piles like food. The city does not look like a city. It looks like a bad decision. Allied occupation forces enter and draw lines on a map. 4 sectors: American, British, French, Soviet. The borders are streets and canals. The hospital stands in the Soviet sector. The city has curfews, a bell at 9 p.m. and again at 6 a.m. There is fear. It is visible behind how people carry themselves down the stairs. It is hidden under the count of calories and the count of coal. The mathematics of survival is a ledger with 3 columns: ration, black market, luck. It is a practiced hand. The hunger winter of 1946 to 1947 arrives as a season and a concept. Potatoes freeze in cellars. Cabbage is a currency. People owe favors in sugar lumps. The nurses in the pediatric ward use mittens when they touch the children, not for infection, for cold. The boilers stop on Thursdays and Sundays. The sheets grow stiff and sour between wash days. A child dies of bronchitis while her mother shivers. The ward matron writes to the magistrate, "Coal will mean lives." The file gets a stamp that reads, "Regret." The ration card becomes more valuable than a wedding ring. A bread ticket in December is a plan to be alive in January. The black market is a market and a conversation and a moral weather system. Cigarettes are currency. American, British and Soviet soldiers flick them away in the street, and a dozen eyes follow. The nurses learn cigarette mathematics: 20 for a kilogram of potatoes, 50 for a pair of boots, 1 carton for penicillin that may have been watered or may have been not. The ethics of a ward are tested by the arithmetic of a market. A mother arrives with a child slow with fever. She has a small vial wrapped in paper. She looks at the nurse. She whispers, "Is it real?" The nurse cannot tell. Real and false sit next to each other in the same pocket. The vial is real this time. The child lives. The nurse writes, "My hands are clean. My hands are clean. My hands are clean. My hands are not clean." Occupation orders go out. The American military government forbids fraternization, then forgets the ban in practice. The Soviet Kommandatura sets new rules. One day, the Soviet medical officer orders that Red Army soldiers have first access to all available antibiotics. The ethics calculus is not new. The priority list has been rewritten with the same pencil 3 times. She prefers to give penicillin to who will benefit most. She is told to give it to who carries a rifle. The denazification process begins. Forms multiply. Fragebogen. 49 questions, 61 more. Everyone fills them out. Party membership, positions held, affiliations. Did you attend rallies? Did you donate money? People become historians of themselves. A nurse writes that she joined nothing. She did not. An administrator writes that he joined for his job. He did. A doctor writes that he attended meetings out of curiosity. He may have. The Spruchkammern, the denazification tribunals, convene in rooms that still smell of damp plaster. Categories are assigned: major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, exonerated. The majority fall into followers. The mathematics of guilt is adjusted to fit the scale of society. A handful go to prison. Many go home. Karl Brenner appears in these files. Denazification, Neukölln, 1946 to 1947. His party membership is recorded. Mitläufer, a follower. He is suspended from the hospital on 15 June 1946. He appeals. He writes that he joined for professional reasons and that he never participated in crimes. He gets 2 affidavits. one from a nurse who writes that he always found bandages for the poor, one from a pharmacist who owes him a debt. The Spruchkammer notes the affidavits. It writes, Category 4, Mitläufer. He pays a fine and returns to work in September 1947. The denazification file has a crease from being folded into a coat pocket and carried to the hearing. It returns to a cabinet. The cabinet locks. The key has a new owner. The hospital experiences a quiet reconstruction. British and American relief trucks bring food and medical kits. They arrive at Tempelhof and at the end of some streets. American PX stores carry items that drift into ward cabinets. Dental needles, a box with a smiley cartoon. A British medic hands the nurse a small tin of cocoa in return for a favour. She writes, Hope is brown and dissolves in hot water. The displaced persons' camps appear at the edges of the map like new suburbs of sorrow. Jews, forced labourers, POWs. The DP camp at Schlachtensee, barracks at Wannsee, barracks that saw something else in 1942, names that twist the stomach. The DP clinics have doctors who are survivors and who learn to operate under lice and hunger. The Germans hear singing outside the camp at night in languages that have to fight their way back into voices. A hospital letter states, We have been asked to provide 2 surgeons to assist at the DP hospital on alternating Sundays. The nurse volunteers. She expects to feel hatred. She finds distance and a measured courtesy. A DP patient says, You are the first German who has touched me in kindness. The nurse writes the sentence down and does not show it to anyone for 20 years. There are moments when Germans realize what had been done in their name. It is not one moment. It is a scatter of moments. A film, a photograph, a rumor, a neighbor's missing child who never returns, and later it is said he was not in the war, he was never in the war. A train that passed through the city at night with covered windows. People had said it carried munitions. The American newsreels show bodies in striped uniforms piled like broken furniture. The Allied information officers organize screenings. Der ewige Jude is replaced with death mills. People look and then look down. Some cry, some clamp their jaws, some walk out. The mathematics of sorrow collides with the mathematics of denial. One journalist writes, We cannot bring the dead back to life. We cannot let the living say it did not happen. The hospital staff talk in the lunchroom and swallow sentences. Meanwhile, millions of Germans are expelled from the East. The trains arrive from East Prussia, Silesia, Sudetenland. Arrival boards record numbers. Faces enter the city with nothing but a sack. A woman shows a birth certificate from Königsberg, a city that now has a new name. A man carries a piece of furniture wrapped in a blanket, corner broken, leg gone. Expellees, Vertriebene. They are Germans and strangers. Berlin is already full. Rooms are lists. Beds are arithmetic. Karl is given a sheet with a list of rooms to be requisitioned for hospital staff and expellee families. He knocks on a door in Steglitz. A widow answers. He explains that 2 rooms must be shared. A family of 4 enters. The widow keeps a corner with an icon and a chair. The hospital gets a nurse because the new family's daughter can work nights. The arithmetic is simple and cruel. The ledger balances on paper. It does not balance in hearts. Tensions flare. Locals say the newcomers are rude. Newcomers say the locals are arrogant. Occupation reports to London and Washington list social tensions, common grumbling. The Soviet sector reports list class enemy agitation. The words change. The hunger is the same. The Allied forces bring instruction manuals for democracy. Voting returns to boards. Parties reform. The Social Democrats under Kurt Schumacher. The Christian Democrats under Konrad Adenauer. Berlin is a special case. Berlin is many special cases. The city council meets in a building without windows. Minutes are taken as if the city is normal. The minutes are a map of denial and hope. School books are rewritten. Teachers are denazified, sometimes by their students. New textbooks lean on the language of misled nation and suffering under dictatorship. The bombing is described in detail. The expulsions are told as an epic. The perpetrators are less visible. It is a first draft of memory. It will take decades to edit and reissue. Children learn about Weimar and Hitler. Children learn about Weimar and Hitler, and they draw pictures of houses with no roofs. They learn that there will be a future. They learn that there has been a past. They are not taught all of it. Some mothers are relieved, some fathers nod. Some survivors in the DP camp wonder if this is how forgetting begins again. 1947. Karl returns to the procurement office. The desk is scarred. The cupboard still smells of cognac. He opens his ledger. He writes in a neat hand. He assigns numbers to everything: bandages, sheets, ampoules, soap, gauze, sutures. He knows that the mathematics of the hospital resolves into a formula. A patient is a sum of needs, the ward is a sum of sums, and the city is an addition you cannot do on paper. He writes to an American captain for a replacement autoclave valve. The captain writes back, "Cannot supply, try British." He tries British. The British say, "Inquire next quarter." He tries the black market. It says yes. He pays in cigarettes and an old microscope. The autoclave works by mid-September. He adds an item to his private accounting called debts and does not specify whether they are moral or material. Elizabeth transfers to Bethanian Hospital in Kreuzberg in late 1947. It is closer to where she now sleeps, in a sublet room divided by a blanket. On the other side, an expellee family coughs at night. She wears a scarf to keep her hair out of her face. She saves one good blouse for Sunday. In her drawer, she keeps the paper with the line about 3 armies. She is afraid to burn it. She is afraid to keep it. Fear is no longer red and black flags. It is a quiet thing that lives under the skin. She can tell which sector she is in by the cigarettes in the cafeteria. In the Soviet sector, they are strong and short. In the American, they are long and white. In the British, there is tea. The hospital cafeteria becomes a small map of the Cold War before the newspapers say it out loud. 1948. Currency reform. The Deutsche Mark appears in the Western zones in June. People line up. They hold out their ration cards and identity cards. Their fingers touch new paper that is supposed to weigh more than old paper. Prices adjust overnight. The black market takes a breath. It loses some power. It does not die. Cigarette calculus declines, but does not end. Bread prices stabilize. Bus tickets get printed in a good ink. The East introduces the Ostmark. 2 currencies in one city. Shops in the West fill with tinned fish and soap. Shops in the East fill with lines. The reports call this a divergence. The nurse calls it a fork that feels like a crack. June 1948. The Soviets block the roads to West Berlin. The rail, the canals. The city in the western sectors is cut off. The windows are full of faces again. People are looking up. The first American planes arrive. The British too. Airlift. Rosin bomber. Candy bombers. The smell of aviation fuel. The slabs of chocolate tied to parachutes for children in Tempelhof. Coal is flown 1 sack at a time. The mathematics of air becomes the city's algebra, tonnage per day, per person. Calories per kilogram of flour. Degrees Celsius per kilogram of coal per household. The arithmetic is printed in the newspapers so that fear can be converted into numbers that look like control. Hospitals depend on that arithmetic. Bethanian draws a coal allotment. It is insufficient. In surgical theatres, lights dim. The sterilizer must be scheduled around the flight timetable. Instruments are wrapped in cloth and carried like fragile eggs. Colleagues take shifts at night to light the stove in the children's ward. The city government publishes a timetable: laundry days, boiling days, surgery days. The hospital becomes a machine synchronized with propellers. Elizabeth writes, "We live in the rhythm of arrivals." She gives aspirin and hopes for flights. She watches American pilots step down and smile with a tired confidence. She watches Soviet patrols stand at the sector border with rifles and stare. She watches the British tally each sack of coal like a treasure. She admires their pencils. She admires their pencils. She is not sentimental. She knows that politics is a machine that uses people as cogs. She is willing to be a cog if the machine moves in a direction that leads to heat in winter. Carl learns a new administrative language. He reads British Air Ministry memos and Supply Committee minutes. He attends a meeting where a US colonel explains airlift priority for medical supplies. The colonel says, penicillin, insulin, serum. He says it like adding and subtracting. The list is short, and life is in the commas between the items. The colonel leaves. Carl spreads forms across his desk. He knows that if he uses the word critical twice, the British docket him for exaggeration. If he uses it once, the Americans deliver. He experiences a minor miracle. A crate of penicillin arrives on time. He writes a thank you letter with sentences he thinks will be filed. They are filed. They sit in a folder marked gratitude. The contents are proof of a city's dependence and of the ordinary courtesy that passed between strangers when everything else was scarce. The blockade ends in May 1949. The planes keep flying for a few weeks to build a buffer in coal and flour. Then they stop. Berlin learns the sound of silence again. It is not peace. It is a pause. A hospital is an institution of continuity. It was there under empire, republic, dictatorship, occupation, airlift. It is there now under two sides. It learns to make propaganda and to forget propaganda. It treats ideology with physiotherapy. It treats hunger with soup. The years after the blockade are years of building. West Berlin's economy ties itself to the Marshall Plan. Boxes stamped with ERP arrive, the European Recovery Programme, machines, syringes, sheets. Bundesarchiv records note deliveries to health institutions, 1950–1952. East Berlin builds in concrete and slogans. Pride is a material. People in both sides carry bricks. Karl is offered a job in the city health office, Charlottenburg. He takes it in 1950. He is good with numbers. He sits in a room with other men in threadbare suits and builds budget tables. He reads 2 newspapers to understand his city. He reads one to understand the Western programs. He reads another because his sister lives in Lichtenberg and says, "You should know what we are told." He sees the world in columns. He has a wife now, Barbara, who was an evacuee from Pomerania, and a son born in 1948. He does not tell his son about his party membership. He tells him about ration cards and good soup. The school sends homework that draws clear lines between dictators and democrats. He appreciates the clarity. He knows that the world is built on compromises no schoolbook can print. Elizabeth continues to work nights. She becomes a senior nurse. The young nurses call her Sister Liesel. She starts a folder in which she places cut-out articles about medicine. Some celebrate penicillin and the discovery of streptomycin. Some talk about ethics. An American journal sends a free copy to the hospital. It contains a confession by a German doctor who was present at a T4 meeting in 1940. He writes that he was misled. The sentence receives no reply in the journal. In the hospital lunchroom, no one says the words out loud. The silence is its own language. Elizabeth writes, We learn the grammar of not saying. The ethics under each authority have been different in form and similar in cost. Under the Nazis, she learned to speak to soldiers first and to the frightened second. She learned that not knowing is a profession like nursing. It requires training. Under the Soviets, she learned that requisition can be violence, and that some violence calls itself requisition. She learned to give aid to men whose comrades had hurt her colleagues. She learned that to care for a body is not to excuse the body's uniform. Under the Americans and British, she learned rules and forms. She learned that every new rule produces a new black market. She learned that a signature can be a prayer for a delivery of gauze, and that the answer to the prayer is often the clerk's mood in another building. She learned that patients sometimes told her who they had been. "I was SS," one whispers in a fever. "I was resistance," another claims in health. She learned to nod and to write down only pulse, respiration, temperature. She learned that the war continued in different forms, in courtrooms, in job applications, in the new names above old doors. The mathematics of guilt worked with the mathematics of need. The hospital needed a good surgeon. The surgeon had written an essay in 1936 praising racial hygiene. The hospital hired him in 1948 because he had steady hands and because there was no other surgeon. The file included a note, to be monitored. The monitor was a secretary who wrote, "Arrived on time." The moral sum did not add up. The patients recovered. The nurse wrote, "We will pay for this later, or we will pretend that we did." The DP camps empty slowly into departures and into nowhere. Some go to Israel, America, Canada. Some stay and become neighbors. The ones who stayed learned German curses. They learned Berlin humor. They smiled without showing their teeth. A Jewish doctor at the Jewish hospital in Wedding writes to an American colleague, "We are building a hospital in a city that signed our discharge papers with ink and later with deportation orders. We are using their language to prescribe." I do not know if this is wisdom or irony. The letter sits in an archive. You can hear the shrug. By 1952, the Wirtschaftswunder starts to whisper in West Germany, less in West Berlin. Berlin always lags in miracles. In the West, factories run. In Berlin, they cling. The hospital gets a new X-ray machine. It hums. It is someone's idea of the future. A reporter visits. He writes, "Medical technology is a spearhead of recovery." The nurse thinks it is a needle, not a spear. Carl inspects invoices and signs vouchers. He discovers a calm he likes in adding things that must be added. He has a sense of building something that will survive a winter. He belongs to no party now. He votes. He keeps his party book in a drawer, and one day he takes it out and burns it in the kitchen stove. The smell is different from wood. His wife says nothing. Berlin's commemorations shift. In 1950, the city marks the anniversary of the blockade. Speeches talk about courage, solidarity, candy parachutes. There is applause. There is truth. There is a silence about other anniversaries. The day of the first deportations. The days of the firestorms. The days when the hospital wards receive children with no parents. The official history adjusts and chooses. The unofficial history continues in kitchens and in notebooks. Elizabeth looks at the flyers for new parties. On the bulletin board, someone has put up a notice, "Nurses needed for Vietnam. International solidarity." It is 1954. The world has not ended after all. It has multiplied. A British documentary team visits and films the Charité's facade. It looks restored and incomplete. A Soviet liaison officer gives them lines about progress. The British narrator speaks about Berlin, a city at the crossroads of fate. He does not go into the ward. He does not smell ether and blood and boiled sheets. The modern story is built just outside the door where the old story persists. The nurses keep working. The staff meetings are gentle arguments about linens and schedules and salaries. The Director General of the hospital gives a speech. He thanks agencies and officials and donors and the brave women who cleared the rubble. He does not thank the women who lived in the rubble. He does not thank to. Elizabeth opens her notebook in 1955 and writes the line again. I have washed the wounds of 3 armies, she adds. This is not a confession or a boast. It is a fact. She had been under the Nazis as a nurse, subject to policies that made her complicit. She had been under the Soviets as a nurse, subject to policies that made her fear. She had been under Americans and British as a nurse, subject to policies that made her file forms. In each, she tried to do one job, to change the dressings on a body not as ideology but as skin. It does not absolve, it does not condemn. It sets the scene for her own small measure of decency. The second hunger winter never comes. Berlin becomes brighter. West Berlin sells itself as an island of the future. East Berlin sells itself as the center of a past corrected. Families separate along a map. Phones ring across sectors. The ring is the same. The voices change. Karl keeps his notebook. In 1956 he writes, I have a desk. It is not a foxhole, but it is where I fought my war. He lists numbers and stories. 40 boxes of gauze delivered the week the power died. 12 nurses who married British or American soldiers and left. 6 men who came to the hospital at the end of a shift and asked for work, any work, because their documents said follower, and they had to prove they were more. 3 times he said no. 5 times he said yes. He does not specify who he refused. He remembers them. Numbers are easier than faces. He remembers them. Numbers are easier than faces. He writes about a day in 1949 when a Soviet soldier on the other side of the border looked at him like a man looks at a mirror. Karl was carrying a box of insulin. The soldier said nothing. He said nothing. Both of them held something in their hands that was important to someone else. It was a small moment of solidarity in a city full of large slogans. The arithmetic of black market medicine loses ground to the arithmetic of procurement contracts. It does not disappear. In 1957, a scandal hits the papers. Hospital supplies diverted to private clinics. Names of men who had shouted, "Never again" and "clean government" appear next to invoices. The city shrugs small. It has seen larger scandals. It is tired of words. It wants, as ever, hot water, clean sheets, penicillin that works. Moral clarity visits in short bursts. It is brighter than the lights and does not last as long. A survivor of Ravensbrück speaks to a church group. The room is full for the first 10 minutes. Then people drift away. Time is in short supply. So is patience for suffering that is not one's own. It is a harsh sentence to write. It is true. The nurse goes. She stays till the end. The speaker says, "We learned to keep gossip alive among the living. It kept our memories moving." The nurse writes it down. 1958. Karl is promoted. He becomes Deputy Director of Procurement. He looks at a city map where his life has played out in a few kilometers. He knows where to find a bowl of soup at the end of a day. It is in a basement canteen with tables that have survived 3 regimes. He eats with his right hand and keeps his left on the edge of the table. Habit. Readiness. A leftover from air raids. He reads in the paper that a former hospital chief who had signed sterilization orders in 1935 has died. The obituary mentions his achievements in pathology. It does not mention the other. The city finishes its soup. Elizabeth retires late. She has varicose veins and a cough. She runs a small class for new nurses. She teaches bed making as if it were a moral act. It is. She says, respect the angle of a sheet corner. It respects the person under it. She does not talk about her first years. She does not talk about the Soviet years. She tells a story about an American who brought oranges into the ward. The oranges are a symbol that everyone can agree on. And yet, in her notebooks, she preserved what she could not say. She preserved the names of patients and the dates. She preserved the line. She preserved her complicity. She does not write the word. She does not need to. The handwriting is hers. There are records in the Bundesarchiv and in occupation reports that contour her story. A short memo, Nurse Hartmann commended for performance during blackout of 23-24 January 1949. A line in an Allied intelligence summary, hospital staff adapting admirably to restrictions. A note in a denazification file about a surgeon's membership in the party. A photograph of the Charité's entrance with a Soviet star pinned above the doorway with cables. You can see if you enlarge it. Oral histories collected in the 1970s that film hands and leave faces in shadow. The archives are cool rooms where paper sleeps. Her notebooks were warm things kept near a stove. The mathematics of the time can be expressed. Calories per day, cigarette prices, number of expellees, number